I have been best friends with Leah Connors for 9 years, and I never once thought she saw me as anything more than that. Let me back up. My name is Drew Calloway. I am 31 years old, I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and up until about 4 months ago, I would have described my life as quietly good. Not perfect. Not the kind of life that gets written about. But good. Stable job in architectural design, a decent apartment on the east side of the city, a small circle of people I trusted. And at the center of that circle, without question, was Leah. We met in our second year of college at the University of Tennessee. She had knocked on my dorm room door by accident. She was looking for her classmate 2 doors down and somehow ended up staying for 3 hours talking about everything from bad cafeteria food to what we each believed happened after we died. We had been inseparable ever since. She was the first person I called when I got my job offer. I was the first person she called when her father had a stroke 2 years ago. We had seen each other through relationships, disappointments, cross-country moves, and the general wreckage that the late 20s tend to leave behind. There had never been anything romantic between us. At least, that is what I had always told myself. And I had told myself it so consistently, for so long, that I had stopped questioning whether it was entirely true. Then I met Amber Reyes. Amber worked at an architecture firm 2 blocks from mine. We had crossed paths at a city planning meeting in October, and she had made me laugh 3 times in the first 10 minutes, which is a statistic I tracked because it had never happened to me that fast before. We exchanged numbers. We texted back and forth for 2 weeks, the good kind of texting, where you look forward to the notification. By the time I asked her out officially, it felt less like a question and more like a formality. Before I go any further, if you have ever been in a situation where doing something completely normal somehow set off a chain of events you were not ready for, take a second right now to like this video, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and subscribe to this channel. Keep watching, because what happened next was something I could not have scripted if I tried. The date was set for a Saturday evening. A restaurant downtown, nothing excessive but thoughtful, the kind of place where you can actually hear the other person speak. I was looking forward to it genuinely, which in itself felt like a good sign. I was not nervous in the anxious way. I was nervous in the alive way. There is a difference, and it had been long enough since I felt the second kind that I noticed it. The Friday night before the date, Leah and I had our usual routine. Every Friday for the better part of 4 years, we got dinner together, rotating between a handful of restaurants we both liked, talking through the week, unwinding. It was comfortable in the way that only something truly consistent can be. I never thought twice about it. It was just what we did. We were sitting at our usual table at a place called the Linden on Church Street when I brought up Amber. Casually. The way you mention something good that is happening in your life to someone who cares about your life. I told Leah I had met someone, that we had been talking for a couple of weeks, and that I was taking her out the following evening. I said it with a small smile on my face because I meant it as good news. Leah went very still. Not dramatically. Not in the way that announces itself. Just still. The way a room goes still when the air pressure changes before a storm. She had been in the middle of lifting her water glass, and she set it back down without drinking from it. Her eyes dropped to the table for a moment, then came back up to me. "That's great," she said. But her voice did not match the words. And I had known Leah long enough to know the difference between what she said and what she meant. I let it sit for a second, thinking maybe she was tired, maybe something had happened at work, maybe I was reading into it. "You okay?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "Tell me about her." So I did. I talked about Amber, how she made me laugh, how she was sharp and thoughtful and direct in a way I found refreshing. And as I talked, I watched Leah's face do something I had never seen it do in 9 years of close friendship. She smiled at the right moments and nodded at the right moments and asked a question at the right moment. She performed interest perfectly. And it was exactly that, a performance. Careful, controlled, and underneath it, something that looked a lot like pain. I drove home that night telling myself I had imagined it. I had not imagined it. The next morning, Saturday, I was in my apartment getting ready for the date. It was around 2 in the afternoon and I was deciding between 2 shirts when my phone rang. It was Leah. I answered without thinking because I always answered when Leah called. "Hey," I said. "What's up?" She did not say anything for a second. I could hear her breathing on the other end, slightly uneven, the way breath gets when someone has been crying or is trying hard not to. "Leah," I said. "What's wrong?" "I need to see you," she said. "Before tonight. Can you come over?" Something about the tone of her voice bypassed every rational thought I had and went straight to the part of me that had always, without analysis or decision, showed up when Leah needed me. I said yes before I even considered saying anything else. I finished getting dressed, put the shirt question aside, and drove the 12 minutes to her apartment on the west side. She answered the door in an oversized sweater, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, and her eyes were red in a way that was impossible to explain away as allergies or a bad night's sleep. She looked like someone who had been sitting with something for a long time and had finally run out of the strength to keep sitting with it alone. I stepped inside. She closed the door behind me. And then Leah Connors, my best friend of 9 years, the most self-contained and steady person I had ever known, looked at me with everything she had ever held back written plainly across her face, and said 4 words that rearranged something fundamental inside me. "Choose me instead, Drew." I stood there in her living room, 2 hours before a first date with a woman I genuinely liked, and felt the floor of everything I thought I understood shift underneath me. Not collapse. Just shift. Enough to make me realize I had been standing on something I had never fully examined, and it had been there the whole time. I did not say anything right away. And in the silence, everything between us, 9 years of it, came rushing up to the surface all at once. I want to tell you what I did next, but first I need to tell you what I felt, because the two things were very different, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. What I felt, standing in Leah's living room with those 4 words still in the air between us, was not simple. It was not the clean, obvious thing that a moment like that is supposed to produce in the movies. It was not instant clarity or a rush of long-suppressed emotion finally breaking free. It was more complicated and more uncomfortable than that. It was the feeling of looking at something you have walked past every day for years and suddenly seeing it properly for the first time and not being sure yet whether what you are seeing is exactly what you think it is. I sat down on her couch. She sat on the chair across from it, which told me she was not trying to push anything. She was just trying to get it said. Before we go any further, if you have ever had someone say something to you that you were not ready to hear, something that made you question things you had already decided about your own life, stay with me. Drop a comment below and let me know where you are watching from. What comes next is the part of this story that I am still not entirely sure I handled right. "How long?" I asked her. She looked at her hands. "A while." That's not an answer. She looked up. "Long enough that watching you talk about someone else last night felt like something breaking." I did not say anything to that. I just let it land. Then she told me the rest of it, in pieces, slowly. She said that for most of the last 3 years, she had been aware that what she felt for me was not the same thing that most people felt for their best friends. That she had told herself it was manageable. That she had been grateful for what we had and had not wanted to risk it. That every time I had dated someone over the years, she had experienced a particular kind of quiet grief that she had learned to bury quickly and efficiently, because the alternative was saying something that might end the friendship entirely. She said that when I mentioned Amber the night before, something in her had reached a limit. "I'm not asking you to feel the same way," she said. "I just couldn't let you go into something new without you knowing. Without me knowing that I tried." I looked at her for a long moment. The afternoon light was coming through the blinds in thin stripes across the floor. Her apartment smelled like coffee and the candle she always kept burning on the bookshelf. Every detail of that room was familiar to me in the way that only truly recurring places become familiar. And sitting there, in a space I had been in hundreds of times, I realized I was seeing it differently now. "Leah," I said carefully. "I had a date tonight. I know. I like her. I know that too." She did not flinch. "I'm not asking you to cancel it. I'm just asking you to think about what we are. What we have actually been. Before you decide what you want." I called Amber that afternoon and rescheduled the date. I told her something had come up with a close friend and that I was sorry and wanted to find another time. She was gracious about it, more gracious than I probably deserved given that I was not being entirely transparent about the nature of what had come up. I told myself I just needed a few days to think clearly. That I was not making any decisions. That I was just pressing pause on one thing to deal with something that needed dealing with. What I did not expect was what happened the following week. I was careful about how I processed things. I gave myself space from both of them, less contact with Leah so I was not making a decision in the heat of something emotional, and a postponed date with Amber so I was not moving forward while operating in a fog. It felt like the responsible thing to do. I thought I was being reasonable. Then one of Leah's friends, a woman named Petra who I had met a handful of times over the years, sent me a message on social media. It was brief and it was cold, and it said that she thought I should know that Leah had been in love with me for years and that it was cruel of me to parade new relationships in front of her the way I apparently had been doing. I stared at the message for a long time. On one level, I understood it. Petra was protective of Leah, and that was not a bad thing. But the framing of it, the word cruel, the phrase parade new relationships, built a version of me that I did not recognize. I had never once known that Leah felt this way. I had never intentionally done anything to hurt her. I had shared my life with her the way you share your life with a best friend, because that is what I believed we were. But the message did something else too. It made me realize for the first time that this situation was not fully private anymore. Petra knew. Which meant other people in Leah's circle probably knew. And Amber, who I had now rescheduled on without a full explanation, was somewhere on the outside of all of this, waiting for a second date from a man who was suddenly, unexpectedly, in the middle of something he did not know how to name. I called Leah that night. She picked up immediately. "Did you ask Petra to message me?" I asked. A pause. Then, quietly, "No." I told her what happened. I didn't tell her to do anything. She called me cruel, Leah. Another pause. "I know. I'm sorry. I'll talk to her." "I need you to understand something," I said. "I am taking this seriously. What you told me. I am not brushing it off or pretending it didn't happen. But I need space to think without outside pressure. Can you give me that?" "Yes," she said. And then, softer, "Drew, I'm sorry. I didn't want it to become a thing." "It already is," I said gently. "But I'm still here. Okay? I'm still here." I meant it. That was the truth of where I stood that week. Not on Leah's side or Amber's side or any particular side. Just still standing, trying to figure out what I actually felt before I did anything that could not be undone. What I did not know yet was that things were about to get significantly more complicated. Nobody warns you that when two people care about you at the same time, the pressure does not stay contained. It spreads. It had been 10 days since Leah's living room. 10 days since I had rescheduled on Amber, since Petra's message, since the version of my life I thought I understood quietly folded in on itself. I had spent most of those 10 days at work, which helped, because architecture demands a kind of focus that leaves very little room for personal upheaval. You have to be present with the measurements and the tolerances and the structural logic of things. There is comfort in that. Stay with me here, because this is the act where everything that had been simmering beneath the surface finally started climbing toward a boil, and it happened faster than I was ready for. I had rescheduled with Amber for a Wednesday evening. The same restaurant I had originally planned, the same table I had reserved. I told myself that whatever was happening with Leah did not give me the right to be unfair to Amber, who had done nothing wrong and deserved at least a real conversation and a proper evening. I also told myself, honestly, that I wanted to see her. That had not changed. Whatever I was sorting through internally, the part of me that had looked forward to Amber's messages and laughed easily in her company was still there and still real. The date was good. Better than good, actually. Amber was exactly as she had been at that first planning meeting, sharp, warm, genuinely funny, and present in a way that made the evening go faster than I wanted it to. We talked for 3 hours. I walked her to her car. She looked at me with a clear and uncomplicated kind of interest that I found, in that moment, like oxygen after being underwater. I drove home feeling something that I recognized as hope. And then I got to my apartment building and found Leah sitting on the front steps. She was not crying. She was not dramatic about it. She was just sitting there in her coat with her hands folded in her lap, and when she saw me pull in, she stood up slowly. I sat with her on the steps for a moment without either of us saying anything first. "You were with her," she said. Not a question. "Yes," I said. I was not going to lie about it. She nodded slowly. "How was it?" "Leah." "I'm asking because I want to know. Not to make you feel bad. Just because I am still your best friend, and best friends ask." I looked at her for a moment. "It was good," I said honestly. "She's a good person." Leah absorbed that in silence. And then something happened that I had not anticipated and that shifted the texture of everything between us. She said, very quietly, that she was not sure she knew how to do this. That she had lived inside the safe container of our friendship for so long that she had no map for what happened now, whether she fought for something or learned to let go or found some third option nobody had told her about yet. And then she started to cry. Not loudly. Just steadily, the way rain falls when it means to stay a while. I put my arm around her because I did not know what else to do, and because 9 years of caring about someone does not switch off because the situation has become complicated. She leaned against my shoulder, and we sat there on the cold front steps of my apartment building for a while, not talking. That image, the two of us on those steps, was apparently witnessed by a neighbor of mine named Croft, a man in his 50s I barely knew beyond polite hallway greetings. I mention this because Croft knew Amber. Not well, but enough. They worked in overlapping professional circles, and Croft, without what I can only assume was any malicious intent, mentioned to a mutual contact that he had seen me come home from somewhere and sit close with a woman outside my building. That information reached Amber by Thursday afternoon. She texted me, "I heard something that confused me. Can we talk?" We met for coffee the following morning. She was measured about it, she was not accusatory, she was not cold, but she was careful in the way that someone is careful when they are trying to decide how much to trust. She asked me directly if there was something going on with someone else. I told her the truth. Not all of it at once, but the honest shape of it. I told her that my best friend had told me she had feelings for me, that it had caught me off guard, and that I was trying to process it without making a decision from a place of confusion. Amber was quiet for a long time after that. "So where does that leave me?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "But I did not want to lie to you." She nodded slowly. "I appreciate that," she said. "But I need you to understand that I am not going to wait in a line, Drew. I like you. I think there is something real here. But not if you are still untangling something with someone else." "That is fair," I said. "So figure it out," she said. And she said it without cruelty, just plainly, the way people speak when they respect themselves enough to mean what they say. I walked out of that coffee shop into the bright November Nashville air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Two women. Two completely different kinds of connection. Both real. Both deserving of more than a man who was standing in the middle trying to think clearly. What happened next was something none of us planned for. Leah called me that same afternoon, and her voice had changed. It was not soft this time. It was tighter, with an edge I had not heard from her before. "I need to tell you something," she said. "And I need you to hear it the right way." "Okay," I said carefully. "I spoke to a lawyer this morning." I stopped walking. "About what?" "About the intellectual property on the Harmon project," she said. And there it was. The thing I had not seen coming at all. The Harmon project was a residential development proposal I had spent 8 months building, research, concept, design documentation, the full architecture of an idea that I had presented to a developer named Harmon Industries 3 weeks ago. What almost nobody knew was that Leah, who worked in urban planning, had contributed substantially to the early concept phase. We had brainstormed it together over 6 months of Friday dinners, on napkins and sketchbooks and shared documents, back when everything between us was still simple. She was claiming co-authorship. And just like that, the personal became legal, and everything got harder. Let me be clear about something before I go any further, because I think it matters. I do not believe Leah woke up that morning and decided to use the Harmon project as a weapon. I do not think that is who she is. But I also know, and I have had a long time now to sit with this, that grief and love and rejection and fear can push people toward actions that do not represent their best selves. And Leah, for all her steadiness and intelligence, was a human being in pain. Pain does not always behave logically. If you have ever watched a situation that started as something personal spiral into something much larger and more public than anyone intended, stay right here. This is the part of the story that tested every single relationship I had, including the one I had with myself. The legal claim Leah filed was not frivolous. That was the uncomfortable truth I had to sit with immediately. She had genuinely contributed to the conceptual framework of the Harmon Project. We had worked on it together over those Friday dinners. I could remember specific evenings where her urban planning knowledge had shaped ideas I later developed into full proposals. Her fingerprints were on the early bones of the thing, and she had documentation to prove it. Emails. Shared documents. Screenshots of late-night conversations where we had traded ideas freely, the way best friends who trusted each other completely did not think to track ownership because ownership had never seemed like a question. I hired an attorney named Bernard Okafor, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who specialized in creative and architectural IP disputes. He reviewed everything and was honest with me in the way that good attorneys are, directly, without cushioning. He said Leah had a legitimate claim to co-authorship of the concept phase. He also said the development and execution, which was entirely mine, held substantial weight of its own, and that the legal picture was genuinely complicated. This was not going to resolve in a single conversation. I called Leah the night after I met with Bernard. She answered. "I need to ask you something," I said. "And I need an honest answer." "Okay," she said. "Is this about the project? Or is this about me?" Silence. Long enough that I could hear her breath on the other end. "I don't know," she said finally. And I believed her. I think at that moment, she genuinely did not know. The two things had become tangled up inside her in a way that probably scared her as much as it scared me. "Leah," I said. "This project is my career. It is not just money. It is the thing I have been building toward for 3 years. If this goes badly, it could cost me the Harmon contract entirely. The developer will walk if there is a legal dispute attached to the work." Another silence. "I know," she said quietly. "Then why?" She did not answer that. Not directly. She said she needed to feel like something she had given mattered. Like she had not poured herself into things, the friendship, the project, the years of Friday nights, and walked away with nothing to show for it. I held the phone and stared at the wall of my apartment for a moment, trying to locate my anger, because I knew it was in there. What I found, alongside the anger, was something that surprised me. Understanding. Not agreement. Not acceptance. But a recognition of the particular desperation that makes a person reach for the only leverage they can find when every emotional door has been closed to them. I had not closed those doors with cruelty. But I had closed them, and she had felt it. Meanwhile, Amber had gone quiet. She was still in contact, a message every few days, checking in without pressure, but she had pulled back enough to give me room to move through what was happening. That restraint, I want to say clearly, was one of the most respectful things anyone had done for me during that entire period. She did not ask for updates. She did not issue ultimatums beyond the one she had already stated plainly. She just waited, at a careful distance, like someone who believed the situation would eventually resolve itself into something true. The legal proceedings began formally in December. Bernard and Leah's attorney, a younger woman named Forsyth, began exchanging documentation. Harmon Industries was notified of the dispute and, as I had feared, their development director called me directly to say they were placing the project on hold pending resolution. It was not a termination. But it was a clock, and it was loud. The month that followed was one of the hardest of my life. I was carrying a legal battle, a damaged friendship, a postponed relationship, and the professional stakes of 3 years of work all at the same time, and all in a city where eventually the people you know start to hear things. My manager at the firm found out. A colleague asked me about it with barely concealed curiosity at a team lunch. The situation had grown outside of me and I could feel it, the way you feel a thing that was once private becoming public and knowing there is very little you can do to stop it. Through all of it, I held on to one thing. I did not stop talking to Leah. I did not go cold. I did not let the legal machinery make us into enemies in our daily contact, even when Bernard advised me to limit communication. I texted her on her birthday, a simple message, nothing loaded. She responded. That felt important to both of us, I think. That there was a cord still there, thin but intact, underneath everything that was pulling against it. In late January, Leah called me without her attorney's knowledge and asked if we could meet. Not to negotiate. Just to talk. I said yes. We met at the Linden on Church Street. Our table. She looked tired in the way that legal proceedings make people tired, not physically worn out but hollowed, like something had been slowly extracted over weeks. I imagine I looked the same. She said she wanted to drop the claim. I looked at her for a long moment. Why? Because this is not what I wanted, she said. I wanted you to see me. I wanted to matter. And I found the one thing that would make you have to pay attention. She looked down at the table. But this is not who I am, Drew. And I think I was so lost in what I was feeling that I forgot that for a while. I did not tell her it was fine, because it was not entirely fine. But I told her the truth, which was that I understood, and that understanding was something I could offer even when forgiveness was still in process. The claim was withdrawn in February. Harmon Industries re-engaged. The project moved forward. And something else happened that February, quieter than all of that, and more lasting. February in Nashville is the month that cannot decide what it wants to be. Some days it is almost warm enough to forget the winter is still happening. Other days the cold comes back hard, as if reminding you not to assume anything. I have always thought it was an appropriate month for transitions. Amber agreed to meet me for dinner on a Friday evening. The same restaurant. I had asked her specifically, because I wanted to start clean and in a place that was already honest rather than somewhere new that would feel like it was trying too hard. She said yes without requiring an explanation for the choice, which told me everything I needed to know about where her head was. If you are still here after everything this story has put you through, I want to thank you. Comment below and tell me whether you saw this next part coming, because I genuinely did not, and it is my own life. She was already there when I arrived, which was typical of her. She was always slightly early, which she had once told me was a form of respect. She looked good in the straightforward way that has nothing to do with occasion and everything to do with ease. She looked like someone who was comfortable being in the room. I sat down. We ordered. And then we actually talked, not around things this time, not with the polite restraint of two people managing a complicated situation, but directly, honestly, with everything on the table. She told me that she had not spent the past several months waiting passively. She had thought carefully about what she wanted, what she was willing to navigate, and where her own limits were. She said she did not hold what had happened against me, not the rescheduling, not the complicated middle months, not the fact that my life had been genuinely messy in ways that were not her fault but had still affected her. She said all of that as fact, not as a negotiation. Then she said something I have thought about many times since. She said, I want to be chosen clearly. Not as a result of elimination. Not because someone else stepped back. I want to be the thing someone walks toward, not what they land on. I held her gaze across the table. I hear you, I said. And I need you to know that is exactly how I feel. This is not about who is left standing. This is about who I have thought about every day for the last 3 months, even when I had more than enough other things to think about. I paused. That's you, Amber. That has been you since that planning meeting in October. She looked at me for a moment that felt longer than it was. Okay, she said. And then she smiled, a real one, without reservation. The dinner lasted 4 hours. We closed the restaurant. When I walked her to her car that night, something was different from the first time I had done it. The first time had been full of possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. This time there was less noise. Just something quiet and solid, a thing that had been tested without quite breaking and was standing on its own now. Meanwhile, the situation with Leah had entered a different phase. Once the legal claim was dropped and the professional crisis had settled, we were left with the more complicated and more fundamental question of what we actually were to each other now. You cannot have a conversation like the one Leah and I had in her living room in January and then simply return to Friday night dinners as if nothing has shifted. Something had shifted. We both knew it. We met for coffee in late February, not at our usual place, at a newer one neither of us had been to, which I think was a mutual and unspoken acknowledgement that we were navigating something new. She asked me about Amber. I told her honestly that we were trying again and that it felt right. She listened without performing the reaction this time. The pain was still there, I could see it in the small adjustments she made to her expression, but something else was there too. Something that looked like a person beginning, slowly, the hard work of accepting a reality they cannot change. I handled things badly, she said. You handled things humanly, I said. There is a difference. She looked at me with an expression I did not know how to fully read. Do you think we can still be friends? Honestly? I thought about it carefully before answering, because she deserved a careful answer. I think that is something we would have to build back slowly, I said. Not something we can just declare. It would take time and honesty and a lot of checking in with each other along the way. Is it worth trying? She asked. I think we are worth trying, I said. She nodded. And for the first time since all of this began, the nod felt like something real rather than something managed. Over the weeks that followed, Leah began the kind of quiet reconstruction that does not make for a dramatic story but is the only kind that actually works. She started seeing a therapist. She told me this voluntarily, which I took as a sign that the honesty between us was finding its footing again. She made some changes to how she spent her time. She stopped reaching for proximity to me as the primary source of stability in her life. That was hard for her, I think. It was also necessary. The Harmon Project launched formally in March. It was credited to me with acknowledgement for concept development consultation, a resolution that Bernard and I had worked out, one that was fair, I believed, and that Leah had accepted. She sent me a message the day it was announced. It said simply, "Congratulations." It deserved to happen. I stared at those words for a while. Then I wrote back, "So did this." I am going to tell you exactly how the ending happened, because I think real endings deserve to be told plainly rather than dressed up. It was a Saturday in April. 8 months after the night at the Linden when I told Leah about a first date and watched her go still across the table. 8 months of the most concentrated emotional complexity I had ever lived through, the confrontation, the legal battle, the professional crisis, the rebuilding, the slow and careful recalibration of everything I thought I knew about my own life and the people in it. If you have stayed with this story all the way to here, I want you to know that what I am about to tell you is worth it. Like this video, comment where you are watching from, and let this reach someone who needs to hear it. Because the ending is not what the title suggests it is. It is something better and quieter and more true. Amber and I had been together, properly, officially, with no question marks attached, for about 6 weeks by April. 6 weeks sounds short. But we had known each other for 6 months by then, and most of that knowing had happened under pressure, which is arguably the most accurate way to learn who someone is. You do not really know a person in the easy times. You know them in the complicated ones. She had met some of my colleagues at a firm event in March and held the room with the same ease that had first caught my attention. She had sat with me one late evening when the Harmon contract was still in its final negotiation and I was too stressed to be good company, and she had not tried to fix it or redirect it, she had just sat with me, which was exactly what I needed and which I had not had to explain. She had asked about Leah, once, carefully, and I had answered honestly, and she had not weaponized what I told her. She had just nodded and said, "That sounds like it was hard for everyone." Which it was. I brought Amber to the Linden on a Saturday evening in April. Not because of the symbolism of it, or not only because of that, but because it was genuinely my favorite restaurant in the city and I wanted to share it with her properly. Halfway through dinner, I reached into my jacket pocket. Not for a ring. I want to be clear. We were 6 weeks into something real and I am not a man who moves recklessly, even when I am certain. What I pulled out was a small card, handwritten, which I am aware is an old-fashioned thing to do, and which I am entirely at peace with. I had written down the specific moments, starting from that planning meeting in October, that had made me certain she was worth every complicated step of getting to this table tonight. I had listed them like evidence because I thought she deserved evidence rather than simply being told. She read it at the table while I watched her face. When she looked up, her eyes were bright, but she was smiling, and the smile was the kind that takes over a person's face without their full permission. "You wrote me a list," she said. "I did," I said. "Of reasons?" "Yes." She looked back at the card for a moment. "Number 4 is that I correctly identified the structural flaw in the Mercer building on our second date." "That impressed me enormously," I said. She laughed, the good kind, full and genuine, and reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Leah came to the Harmon Project launch event in March as a guest. We had arranged it carefully, and it went carefully, politely, warmly, without the weight that had defined the previous months. She shook hands with my manager and talked about urban planning with one of the developers and was, in all the ways that mattered, herself. Not the version of herself that had been pulled off balance by love and loss and a legal claim that should never have been filed. The real version. The one I had known for 9 years before any of this happened. She found me near the end of the evening, briefly, while Amber was talking to someone across the room. "She's good for you," Leah said. She said it looking at Amber, not at me. "Yeah," I said. "I mean it," she said. "I'm not saying it to be gracious. I'm saying it because it's true." I looked at her. "How are you actually doing?" She thought about it for a second. "Better," she said. "Not all the way. But better." She looked at me then. "I think I confused needing you with loving you for a long time. I think I'm just starting to figure out the difference." That sentence landed somewhere real inside me. I did not have a tidy response for it, so I just told her I was glad she was working it out, and I meant it. She nodded. "We're still worth trying," she said, which was a reference to what I had said in February, and which told me she had held on to it. "We are," I said. "The friendship we have now is different from what we had before. It is quieter and more deliberate and occasionally still tender in the way that healed things sometimes are. We meet for coffee about once a month. We do not pretend that nothing happened, and we do not let what happened define every interaction either. We are learning, together, to exist in the space that opened up on the other side of a very hard year. That is the truest thing I can tell you about what forgiveness actually looks like when it is not a movie moment. It looks like monthly coffee and deliberate honesty in two people deciding, over and over, that the history they share is worth tending. Amber and I got engaged 11 months later, on a Thursday evening, and yes, I am aware of the day of the week, and yes, it was intentional. We were in the same park I had walked through alone a dozen times during the hard months, and I had the ring this time, and I had also brought the list, slightly updated, because I believe in evidence. She said yes before I finished asking. Leah once told me that the best things in life do not arrive cleanly. They arrive through the mess of real living, through the decisions you make when it would be easier not to decide, through showing up when leaving would cost you less in the short term. She was right about that, even when she herself was part of the mess. I walked into that Friday dinner 8 months ago thinking I was sharing good news about a first date. What I was actually doing, it turns out, was beginning the most important thing that has ever happened to me. I did not know that yet. But I know it now.